This is a story about a shocking transformation that the public realized far too late. Many people dedicate years to building their professional path, creating a comfortable home, and developing their own business. During periods of stability, there's an illusion that what we've achieved is unshakable. Yet even the most carefully constructed life can face danger, and it's perfectly natural that everyone wants to protect what matters most. However, sometimes such protection crosses the line of reason. On August 17, 1964, Michael Barisone was born in the United States. He gained recognition as a mentor in the equestrian sports world. After winning Olympic gold, he became a living legend. Michael began passing on his accumulated knowledge and mastery of working with horses. Everyone who entered this sport after him aspired to become his student. However, securing a place among his protégés was extraordinarily difficult, as he selected only those who showed real potential. Michael firmly established himself among America's elite riders, representing the national team at the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. This solidified his reputation as an outstanding athlete, and he became a world-class trainer whom countless followers looked up to. He truly reached the pinnacle of success before finding himself at the center of one of the most sensational trials in recent times. Michael owned two large horse farms. One was located near Palm Beach in Florida. The other, called Hawthorne Hill, was situated in Washington Township, New Jersey, where the champion primarily conducted training sessions with his students. In March 2018, 37-year-old Lauren Kanarek began training at this farm. She wasn't an athlete with an impressive track record of achievements. Instead, she was an ambitious amateur who captivated others with her determination. Despite this, the woman harbored dreams of victory and was completely consumed by this idea. Soon, she not only began training under our story's hero but also moved her 5 horses to Hawthorne Hill. The woman rented a house on Michael's farm and put maximum effort into improving her skills. Given Lauren's amateur status, the opportunity to train with a true international-level master was an exceptional chance. Usually, Michael's students worked primarily with his assistants, but Lauren's situation became unique. Lauren insisted on the trainer's exclusive attention. Michael, as with other amateurs, intended to assign her training to his assistants, but the woman categorically demanded to work exclusively with the Olympic champion personally. This certainly created difficulties, as our story's hero had many pressing obligations and couldn't constantly dedicate time to one student. Moreover, there was no need for this. She hadn't yet mastered the basic skills that the assistants could perfectly well teach, and only after that would it make sense to progress to training with the champion. Eventually, Michael had to personally conduct training sessions with Lauren to prevent tension. By the summer of 2019, the situation had significantly deteriorated. Lauren had always been characterized by a confrontational nature, but during this time she became even more brazen and impulsive. At Hawthorne Hill, there was a team of Michael's trainers and assistants, horse care staff, and grounds maintenance personnel. Each of them witnessed the changes in the woman's behavior. The main cause of her indignation, as she saw it, was the insufficient level of training provided by the assistants and the Olympic winner himself. However, no other student had ever complained about the coaching staff, so all her grievances appeared baseless. In his time, Michael Barisone had traveled the same path he now directed his students along. He had learned from champions' assistants before earning their favor. Michael Poulin and other famous athletes rallied around Barisone. They witnessed his difficult journey to the top until he finally became one of the most respected figures in the equestrian world. Michael Barisone was a dynamic, cheerful personality. This is how fellow athletes remembered him, those with whom he later competed at various tournaments. He was an outstanding rider and became an equally skilled mentor. His expertise was highly valued by numerous students. This attracted more and more people eager to at least partially grasp the secrets of his talent. Beyond professional sports, this activity allowed him to purchase, build, and maintain 2 beautiful farms. They housed a large number of horses, workers to care for them, and, of course, students, some of whom even rented housing on the property. Many former students emerged for whom these characteristics weren't empty phrases. Numerous people sincerely expressed gratitude to Michael Barisone, as thanks to him they were able to improve their athletic skills, and some achieved notable results. One could join Michael's farm not only by paying. There was a spacious stable there where there was always plenty of work. To get it done, he regularly invited those wishing to master the art of riding, so he attended amateur tournaments, searching for young talents and potential employees. This created a wonderful opportunity for young people to experience the world of horses at an elite level. From time to time, college students and high school students appeared here, and given the high cost of the trainer's services, this was quite an attractive opportunity for all those interested in athletic development. Lauren Kanarek had devoted her entire existence to horseback riding. She had achieved, as she imagined, a certain level of skill and sought to gain support and learn from the best. Circumstances brought the woman together with Michael, and the trainer was impressed by her persistence and focus on results. He saw in her behavior a reflection of himself in youth, when he was filled with determination to climb the podium and become number one. Lauren was a refined, petite woman who had loved horses since childhood, and over time these creatures became her true obsession. Lauren's childhood and teenage years were spent on a modest horse farm in Ellington, Florida. This affection began when she was only 2 years old, and after her first encounter, she could no longer rid herself of thoughts about these magnificent creatures. Her father, John Kanarek, was quite a wealthy and successful man who had worked on Wall Street for many years. By the time of the events described, he was already enjoying well-deserved retirement and running his own business. He immediately noticed his daughter's deep affection for horses and decided to support her passion, although he himself was far removed from this sphere. John financed the construction of a stable on the farm property. He bought his little daughter a pony on which she could begin her first lessons. This became a real turning point for Lauren, who almost instantly began to feel confident in the saddle. Essentially, these are dance elements that animals must perform together with the rider. Initial lessons promote achieving harmony, teaching one to feel their horse, and Lauren managed this remarkably easily. Her father John understood little about the essence of such activities, but sought in every way to support his daughter's passion. She began training intensively, later transitioned to full-sized horses, became a participant in amateur tournaments, and step-by-step managed to demonstrate professional preparation, although her technique required further improvement. Her first triumph occurred in Belmont, where she won first place. In fact, the meeting with Michael happened through another person's mediation. During that period, one of the Olympic medalists, Stephen Colbert, organized a gathering of amateurs and professionals at his own horse farm. He decided to conduct several sessions for beginners and was surprised by Lauren's abilities. That day, Michael Barisone was also present, becoming an inadvertent observer of Lauren's training as she sought to showcase her skills to Stephen Colbert. Obviously, the champion saw significant potential in her, so after the demonstration ended, he offered the rider to conduct a training session at his farm. Undoubtedly, the offer from a world-class athlete was received with tremendous enthusiasm. Lauren arrived for this session with joy some time later. After Michael expressed his admiration for the woman's skill, she expressed a desire to train under his guidance. The champion agreed to become her mentor, and thus began the story of the complicated relationship between Michael and Lauren, which affected the fate of every resident of the farm and everyone who worked there. From the very beginning, Michael Barisone set a standard training fee, $5,000 per month. Under these terms, the woman moved to Hawthorne Hill along with her 5 horses. Understanding that she was at a considerable distance from her home, Michael generously offered to provide her with housing at no additional cost. Lauren immediately took advantage of the situation and brought her boyfriend, Robert Goodwin, with her. For the young couple, Michael provided a separate 2-story house built on his farm property, located approximately 200 meters from the owner's main residence. Later, the man recalled that all this property was the fruit of his many years of effort. He had built a brilliant sports career, won numerous honors and awards, and earned solid money. He invested all his accumulated savings into creating and developing his own business. It's worth noting that the champion had no other students whom he trained on such favorable terms. Despite the fact that the young couple occupied a spacious house on his property, he didn't demand an increase in payment. Certainly, he had to cover the costs of maintaining the building, which could have been rented out for additional income. However, the man was so impressed by Lauren's talent that he decided to overlook this and left the price unchanged. Essentially, from that moment Lauren along with her partner Robert settled on the famous Olympian's farm. The $5,000 monthly payment was made by the girl's father. Considering the high quality of training, professional care for her horses, and free accommodation, this was quite a modest sum. Lauren's father considered this arrangement extraordinarily successful. After all, finding a mentor of such caliber for similar money was practically impossible. Unfortunately, his daughter's behavior didn't match any sense of gratitude. At the same time, other people lived on the farm property, assistant trainer Justin Carden and Mary Haskins Gray, who served as Michael's assistant. The divorced woman was not just the Olympian's work partner, she had become his lover. Mary also came from the equestrian world, participated in Grand Prix competitions, for which she prepared under Michael Barisone's mentorship, and simultaneously performed duties as an assistant and trainer in his stables. Mary had 2 children, and from the very first days of their life together, Michael treated them as his own. They developed a wonderful relationship. Mary characterized Michael as an extraordinarily decent and benevolent man, her children simply adored him, and he reciprocated their feelings. Essentially, they had become a real family. The outstanding athlete's life flowed steadily and peacefully, and no signs indicated the future tragedy. Being an active Facebook user, Lauren immediately began posting photos with her mentor. She posted updates with horses and Michael, but soon the atmosphere began to take on strange contours. During the first summer season, certain tension arose in the relationship with the student. Michael Barisone repeatedly mentioned that the girls sought to monopolize all his attention. Understandably, the man had many affairs and couldn't always be present during each of her sessions with the horses. However, she categorically refused to work with his assistants. Despite the fact that they were also highly qualified professionals, Mary and Justin noticed that Lauren always displayed dissatisfaction when they substituted for Michael. Mary, who was in a romantic relationship with Michael, noticed the most negative manifestations in her manners. In her opinion, Lauren behaved like a competitor trying to pull all the trainer's attention to herself. As a result of the problematic student's behavior, the atmosphere on the farm began to deteriorate, and more grounds for disputes arose. Lauren began to think that the money her father invested in training was being wasted. At the same time, she completely ignored the fact of practically free accommodation on the outstanding athlete's property, who had graciously provided housing not only for her but also for her boyfriend and horses. The tense atmosphere persisted until June 2019, when the woman's dissatisfaction escalated into open conflict. Lauren didn't hesitate to express her grievances to Mary about the head trainer's work style. She claimed that she was paying for lessons with the most outstanding specialist, not with his subordinates. From Mary's point of view, this was an obvious display of jealousy. Lauren, however, insisted that everyone else on the farm was just a pale copy of Barisone, and they could never make her a real champion. Although in reality she was extraordinarily far from perfection and hadn't mastered even elementary riding techniques. Eventually, she expressed her grievances to Michael himself. The man tried to explain to the student that assistant trainers working with students was standard practice in their environment. Additionally, he emphasized that the money Lauren's father paid for training was quite a modest sum for the services of specialists of such caliber. He stressed that Lauren and her partner lived on the farm property without any additional charge for accommodation. Understandably, Lauren had nothing to counter with, but the offense ran deep, and she wasn't going to leave it without consequences. In early 2019, she published a provocative post on her social media page. Lauren critically expressed herself about Michael's work and his farm in general. Thus began the formation of Hawthorne Hill's negative image. On her social media profile, she began to describe in detail her disappointment with Michael. Lauren had hoped for much more, but in her opinion, Michael hadn't lived up to her expectations. Such publications began appearing on the internet more and more frequently. In fact, they had occurred back in 2018, but at first no one paid attention to them, and gradually the woman became increasingly aggressive in her posts. Additionally, she informed her father that her horses were under threat. Naturally, this caused the man concern, as the animals themselves cost considerable money. She tried to convince her father that the horses weren't receiving proper care. Supposedly she had developed sleep problems due to worrying about their health. Lauren claimed that the horses were being fed incorrectly, they had even begun to look unhealthy. All of this turned out to be pure fiction, but stopping the spread of false information was already impossible. Michael and his team simply had no idea what was happening until it was too late. However, Lauren had no intention of stopping at lies. Together with her partner, she decided to place audio recording devices throughout the farm. The woman collected information and began creating provocative publications, taking Michael's ambiguous statements out of context. Based on these manipulative posts, she launched a campaign to discredit Barisone. The girl accused him of racism, anti-Semitism, and homophobia, providing dubious excerpts from his private conversations. Given sports ethics, all this could cause serious consequences. The outstanding athlete began being excluded from participation in sporting events. Considering how sensitive these topics are in the USA, she provoked a real wave of outrage against Michael. The man, unexpectedly finding himself under a barrage of internet attacks, began to refute all these accusations. The student's actions were causing serious damage to the Olympian's reputation. His supporters believed that against the backdrop of the accusations, the business could suffer substantial losses, even find itself on the brink of complete collapse. Meanwhile, during this period, Lauren and her partner Robert Goodwin continued to occupy one of the houses on the farm. Despite the dissatisfaction and conflicts, they refused to leave the property. Michael insisted on their departure and no longer wished to see them, but they firmly refused. On these grounds, Michael contacted the police. According to the outstanding athlete, during this period he even began to fear for his own life. Unfortunately, law enforcement representatives simply ignored all these appeals, considering the conflict an ordinary dispute between a landlord and tenants. No one anticipated that the confrontation could reach such proportions. Meanwhile, the situation on the farm continued to escalate. During this time, many noted a serious deterioration in the Olympic champion's psychological state. He even began to look much worse and resembled his own shadow. He accused his student of creating unbearable conditions within his own property. At that point, Michael didn't yet know about the hidden recording devices. Essentially, she organized harassment on the territory of the farm that belonged to the very victim of the persecution. At the same time, Lauren herself accused the mentor of humiliating her in various ways. Considering that she was a delicate girl and the Olympic champion was a sturdy, athletic man, her claims sounded quite plausible. No one could assume that such a pleasant woman could simply fabricate all these stories. The situation reached the point where Michael's partner, Mary, couldn't withstand the psychological pressure and moved off the farm with her children. Michael was furious. Understandably, such a situation couldn't continue indefinitely. Therefore, the mentor announced to Lauren and Robert that they had to leave the farm along with their horses. To his great surprise, the young people categorically refused to do so. Then the outstanding athlete turned for support to Lauren's father, but he clearly took his daughter's side and ignored the request to take her away. He insisted that the paid funds hadn't been fully worked off yet. Michael felt cornered and didn't know what to do next. On June 31, 2019, the famous athlete again contacted the police. He described the situation in detail and asked for help from law enforcement representatives. However, he was ignored again, with authorities considering what was happening an ordinary rental dispute. The man was advised to handle his problems independently and not bother the authorities over trifles. He again approached Lauren and Robert with a request to leave the farm. But this time too, the couple responded with a categorical refusal. Subsequently, this was repeated many times, they simply didn't want to leave Barisone's comfortable house. According to Michael, the situation continued to deteriorate. It seemed to him that Lauren possessed complete information about his life, controlled his every step, and didn't miss a single opportunity to complain on social media. However, one important detail was hidden from Lauren. The Olympic champion kept a safe for storing firearms in his office, where a pistol lay. Of course, his endurance and restraint had their limits. The student's behavior created such unbearable circumstances that the man began suffering from insomnia and problems in personal relationships. His appetite disappeared, he lost mental balance and easily lost self-control. Michael, who was obviously tired of this situation, decided to seriously engage in training his student. At the same time, he was experiencing significant losses that Lauren was causing to his business activities. Financial difficulties only intensified the tension. Even under such circumstances, Lauren didn't stop attacking, began sending threatening messages to Michael, which forced him to contact law enforcement again. Unfortunately, his statement again remained without proper attention, as had happened before. In fact, at that point Lauren was only beginning her insidious campaign. On August 7, 2019, she decided that she had collected sufficient compromising material on her trainer and made all this information public on social media. Subsequently, she filed a complaint with Child Services, accusing Mary of improper treatment of children. An official investigation began regarding Mary. Throughout all this time, Lauren's father remained on the sidelines. But this step wasn't the end of her malicious plan. The girl filed a complaint with the Congress on Sports Safety, bringing charges against Michael. She delivered a lengthy speech, describing in detail the alleged harassment by the titled athlete, cruel treatment, and sexual abuse toward her. Of course, this was a lie. Despite the existence of audio recordings of all conversations on the farm territory, no evidence of her claims was found. Given all the charges brought, social services representatives were ready to remove the children, but Mary no longer lived at Hawthorne Hill Farm at that time. The Olympic prize winner faced serious sanctions and bans, as well as the destruction of ties with the entire sports community. The enterprise without new clients also balanced on the brink of financial collapse. After these events, Michael went to his city office. It was at this time that Mary's meeting with a social services representative was taking place, where the issue of removing the children was being discussed, as the trainer's assistant was also mentioned in Lauren's statements. Michael and his beloved were in despair. He kissed his girlfriend and asked her to wait a few minutes outside. The man approached the safe in his office, took out his weapon, and loaded it. From that moment, as Michael later testified, he couldn't remember anything except the path to the farm, as if his memory had been erased. In fact, he immediately headed to the farm as soon as he had driven his beloved and the social worker in his pickup truck to Mary's residence where the children were. Arriving at Hawthorne Hill, Michael approached the building where Lauren and her boyfriend Robert lived. What happened next is not known for certain. At 2:13 p.m., Lauren called the 911 emergency line. She was breathing heavily and reporting an attack on her. At that moment, Robert was fighting with Michael. The girl begged the dispatchers to send police as quickly as possible, as she was injured and having difficulty breathing. She had been shot several times. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they saw Lauren with 2 bullet wounds to the left side of her chest. Near her on the ground lay Michael Barisone, whom Robert and their dog had managed to subdue. Everyone had sustained serious injuries, and Lauren was losing blood. Michael had received a powerful blow to the head and lost consciousness. The police officer who arrived turned Michael over, who was lying face down. The man was alive. Near his left hand on the ground was a pink and black 9mm Ruger pistol. The weapon was immediately taken for examination. The paramedics who arrived evacuated Lauren and the other victims of the tragedy. The now scandalously famous student was desperately fighting for her life. The girl's condition proved extremely serious, causing doctors to induce a medically induced coma. This became necessary due to the real threat of brain damage resulting from massive blood loss. She was connected to life support systems. Michael had been beaten but hadn't received life-threatening injuries. The very next day he was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of attempted murder. He insisted that he couldn't remember any details of what had happened. The man insisted that he had never had a tendency toward aggression or anger, so he believed the incident was another provocation by Lauren. Thus began the trial in Morristown, New Jersey, which stretched out for 3 whole years. Hearings were scheduled for late March 2022. For most of this period, Michael remained in prison without the possibility of bail, but he desperately sought support. The man persistently argued that he had become a victim of his student, who had turned into a real stalker and waged war in his own home. Lauren during this time also defended her version of events. She was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. Then spent 3 weeks in the intensive care unit. The victim was connected to life support systems and couldn't even speak due to the intubation tube. In fact, she balanced on the edge of life and death, but doctors managed to save Lauren. And now she was determined to achieve life imprisonment for Michael. According to Lauren, Michael had lurked behind bushes near the back entrance when she approached him, not knowing about the man's possession of a pistol. She began a dialogue with him when he unexpectedly raised the weapon and shot her twice. Her partner Robert insisted that he was nearby when he observed Michael shooting Lauren, and then trying to shoot him too, but missing. Therefore, Robert fought back and subdued the attacker. The Olympic prize winner's defenders referred to a brief clouding of consciousness, an affective state that was provoked by Lauren's actions and her partner's support. The man had indeed suffered enormous losses from all these events. He lost his reputation, client base, and savings. To provide legal defense in court, he was forced to sell Hawthorne Hill, the farm he had created from scratch with his own efforts and money and loved infinitely. The relationship with Mary was broken, as she was worried about her children and the possibility of their removal by protective services. However, she became an important defense witness and described in detail in court the terror that Lauren had arranged in the summer of 2019. She thoroughly recounted how the student invented increasingly cruel ways to take revenge on the mentor and other trainers out of jealousy. They had long tried to evict her even during the period when a flood occurred on the farm and the utility building was flooded. But they refused to leave. Michael with Mary and the children were forced to relocate and live in the utility building while repairs were ongoing in their house, and Lauren and Robert didn't even allow them to settle in the building where they were only temporary residents. Mary insisted that Lauren and her partner didn't fulfill their promise and didn't leave the farm territory even after training ended. Instead, they continued to live on someone else's property like squatters. Because of this, Michael contacted the police about illegal seizure of the house, but to no avail. At the same time, Mary emphasized that until the last moment Michael was an exemplary man and wonderful father to the children, even though they weren't his own. She had a long history of relations with Barisone. Once he became her mentor and helped her reach the heights, get to the Olympics. She characterized him as an outstanding mentor and trainer who maintained the best human qualities and was devoted to her. Another assistant trainer, Justin Carden, also testified in court and confirmed that collaboration with Lauren was difficult. The insanity defense tactic chosen by the lawyers was quite risky, as such a defense strategy rarely yields results. A thorough assessment of Michael's mental state was necessary, for which they engaged a leading forensic psychiatrist as well as several independent specialists. They spent many hours in consultation with the former Olympian. The experts indeed believed that Lauren could have done everything that Michael and Mary testified about. His psycho-emotional state deteriorated under the influence of organized terror until it reached a critical limit. Barisone had indeed never demonstrated a tendency toward aggression or cruelty, but circumstances pushed him to take up arms. There were other reasons for memory loss. In fact, Michael remembered taking out the weapon, loading it, and driving to the farm. He insisted that he didn't plan to kill anyone, but at a certain point a fight began with Lauren's partner. Robert delivered a powerful blow to his head. In the medical expert's opinion, this could have caused amnesia. Besides Michael, Lauren was also subjected to careful attention. At a certain point during testimony, she admitted that she had intended to destroy her mentor's business. The motive was jealousy and disappointment. She believed she could achieve the highest results, but these hopes weren't realized. Michael believed that the tragic events could have been avoided. If the young people hadn't organized online harassment, had immediately complied with the demand and left someone else's property. Lauren's father's reaction to this conflict and the police's position also raised many questions. In total, 4 official appeals were recorded from Michael asking for help in resolving the conflict, but none of them elicited a proper response from law enforcement. The inaction of all parties caused the tragedy. After almost 3 weeks of hearings, the jury retired for deliberation to reach a verdict. He faced up to 80 years in prison. Consideration of all the circumstances of the case lasted almost 4 days, after which the verdict was announced. 58-year-old Michael Barisone was acquitted by reason of insanity. The defendant, overwhelmed with emotion and sobbing, rushed to embrace his defender. His legal team celebrated, calling it a triumph of justice. A few weeks later, Michael was sent to a psychiatric facility for treatment. In November 2023, the Olympic prize winner gained his freedom, but he now needs to undergo regular medical examinations and therapy. He lives on his other farm in Florida. Michael received significant support from the riding community and his comrades, but governing organizations still don't allow him to participate in competitions. For Lauren, the announced verdict was a real shock. She was convinced that she had managed to finally destroy not only her mentor's enterprise but also his life. Lauren doesn't stop trying to bring the trainer to justice and has hired a civil lawyer to file a lawsuit against the titled athlete. Lauren lives in Summerfield, North Carolina, where she continues to engage in equestrian sports. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.